Together we're going to learn how to mix a few colors and to be really exact about how to mix colors. So I chose a household item that you all can hopefully find in your own home. This is the inside of a Kleenex tissue box. So I just cut out a square and have it so that I can mix the color and match it right next to it. The second two are leaves. So I chose a couple different ones. This is a eucalyptus leaf, and so it's dry and easy to have around the home. If you don't, maybe this one will help. It's just a leaf cut off from a live house plant. So the exercise for this month is to choose 3 things and try and mix and match those colors exactly. If you want to, I'm going to show you how to do these 3 things, and feel free to follow along actually as I do this top one if you have a Kleenex box in your own home. So the first thing that you want to make sure that you have is a palette. Now I'm choosing a gray palette, and it will be much easier for you if you follow along if you have a gray palette. You could also use a wood palette, which is the one that's behind this. Mine's a seasoned wood palette, so it doesn't look very orange. It's been used and wiped down, so it looks more brown. Either one of those are great palettes, but if you're following along with this, it'll be easier if you use the same background as I do. Otherwise, things will look darker or lighter, and it might throw you off. You'll need a palette knife, that's all we'll be using, paper towels, and then the colors. So these are always the colors I put on my palette every single time I go to paint. Landscape painting, still life painting, figure painting, portrait painting, anything. Occasionally I'll add on a couple to add a much fuller green range to this, but for now this will suffice perfectly, as it does for many, many things. So this is a titanium white, this is cadmium yellow pale, yellow ochre pale, burnt umber, raw umber, ivory black, French ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and cadmium red. If I were to need any other colors, let's say something that was like a teal green, or to try and expand in sort of the red family, like sometimes really bright pink roses call for a different color. I might add a magenta from Michael Harding. If I want to expand my blues out, I would add a manganese blue, a blue that leans towards green. If I wanted to expand my yellows out, I would add a lemon yellow. I like to use, I think it's Michael Harding, I'm not sure, but it's a yellow that leans towards green, whereas this one doesn't. If anything, it leans maybe slightly orange, but or maybe just yellow. Now, I don't add those colors often to my palette because the things that I paint are often more earth tone, and you can see that on the work on my website. And same thing with Flesh. Flesh is not very high chroma, it's pretty low chroma. So this palette is perfect. So you don't have to break the bank, and you don't always have to worry about color mixing and matching, like, oh, I don't have the right color, because you very much can mix a whole amazing variety of colors with this. And that's part of this exercise. I want you to really hone in on these specific items and spend a long time mixing and matching. Before you begin, please take a look at the exercise on hue, value, and chroma. And that will be a very important lesson because I can't add all of that into this lesson. It's just too much of a big lesson. So the hue, value, chroma, color mixing exercise. All right, so let's start with this top one here. What you want to do is look at it and try and decipher in your head its hue, its value, and its chroma. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, well, the hue, it's not green, it's sort of a brown, but if I was to think of a specific color, I would say it's maybe slightly in the yellow family, maybe, but I also see hints of like perhaps slightly purple in there, and I think that's because it's compared to this blue background. So this is a very difficult one. A word for this that is often used to describe colors like this that are pulled away from the hues in the color wheel are low chroma colors, and they're neutrals. So this is very much a neutral. When it's really hard to discover or to decipher, pinpoint what hue it is off the bat, then it's close to a neutral color. Just like this background, this is a neutral color, but it leans a little bit more blue in the video. So this is a neutral that I think, you know, as a hue, it's going to have a little bit of yellow in it. Now, just to sort of run that point home, this is a neutral, whereas these two, the hues are more distinguishable. They're more obviously green, so they're not neutrals. Okay, so back here. Now the value. The value is pretty light. Now, you want to think about value as compared to white and black, because that's our value range. So is it closer to black, or is it closer to white, or is it maybe smack in the middle? And I'm going to say that it's in the middle, but it's closer to white. In terms of value, it's closer to the lights. And chroma, it's a low chroma, and I know that because it was hard to tell the hue. All right, so the second thing you want to do after you decipher that is to take a look at the colors on your palette and say to yourself, well, which ones are the closest right out of the gate? And I'd say that maybe the raw umber or the burnt umber are pretty close. I'm actually going to start with the burnt umber because the burnt umber has a little bit of like a red or slightly purple color to it. And it's funny because I kind of see that in there as well. Now I know that's too dark, so that's why I'm going to then say to myself, all right, well, I'm going to try and get this value. So I'm going to mix in some white to see what hue I end up with. You can see just how sort of red, you know, in a way red this looks. I think the easier thing is to try and get the value right. So I'm going to slowly try and lighten this until it gets closer to the value of this. As you add white to something, it drops the chroma. So essentially, it's hiding the hue. It's making it harder to tell the hue of this puddle. And I think we're getting pretty close to the value here, but it still looks too red. So now it's time to think about the hue a little bit more. I think I want to knock out some of that red. And when I compare these two, I see this one as being less red, but I know if I add yellow in here, it's not going to work. I think if I were to add a little bit of the raw umber into here, it would help me to cancel out that red because the raw umber has a little bit of green in it. It's also going to make it a little bit darker, so I have to be aware of that. Really mix it together nice. Now, if it goes too dark, I'll just add a little bit more white and we'll see where that goes. Now, let's add some white, just a little bit at a time. So I still think it needs to be neutralized a little bit. And what I mean by that is that this puddle still looks like it has more of a color to it than this one. It looks like it has more of a hue that's like a slightly pinky hue. And so I'm going to add a little bit of black because I know that black plus white makes more of a neutral. You can see that happen if I leave a little bit of that old puddle. I just added in a little bit of black. Now the true test, what you can do is you can actually take a little bit of this color and put it on top of what you're working on. If you take enough, put it right on top, nice and flat, you'll be able to see if it disappears. Mine disappears pretty well. But I think if I wanted to make it a little bit more exact, I would add a little bit of yellow ochre. Ooh, that might be too much. Yep, because mine, to me, seems almost like it has a purple tint compared to what I'm going for. And remember before I was like, yeah, I think there's a little bit of yellow in there. If I add some yellow ochre, it's low chroma, so it's not going to be crazy. If I added that one, it would just jump like crazy. It's a little bit too dark now, because the yellow ochre is darker than this puddle. So I'm gonna add a little bit of white. It's very careful, it's very slow. And this is an extremely important lesson. So that's why it's our exercise. Ooh, that disappears really nicely. I like that a lot, at least in person. To me, it looks really good. So I'm gonna say we found our color. Awesome. All right, let's take a look at the next one. So there's a lot of colors happening in here because of the form. The light is hitting lighter and more directly here, and sort of grazing across here, and it's barely hitting back there. So what I'm going to focus on is I'm gonna go for, let's see, I'm gonna go for this value right here. And we'll see where it goes from there. So I'm thinking about hue first. Well, it's green, but it's a green, in terms of, does it lean more blue or does it lean more yellow? It's hard to say. I think maybe a little bit more yellow in the lights. And it looks like by the time it gets to some of those halftones, it leans more blue. So I'm gonna say it's a green that leans a little bit more yellow, just a little. It's also going to be a middle value. It's actually a similar value to what's happening here, or what's happening on the palette. So it's a middle to light value. It's not as close to black as it is to white. And then in terms of chroma, it's a low chroma, because I couldn't really tell, like, does it have yellow in it in terms of a balance between yellow and blue? Whereas this one, we can see more of a intensity of color. This one is not as intense, so it's harder to tell, so that means it's lower chroma. You can also remember it like this. Anything that's like a pastel color is going to be more low chroma. So then you want to take a look at your options. Well, we have 2 yellows, and we have 2 blues, because ivory black, when mixed with white, turns blue. We have a high chroma blue and a low chroma blue, and a high chroma yellow and a low chroma yellow. So we have a ton of options here. And I don't know that there's one right way to mix this. I've been mixing these leaves for a really long time, and sometimes it's a different combination, and it works anyway. So let's try some out. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna go for the high chroma blue, because I have to choose one of these. High chroma blue, and instead of going for a high chroma yellow, which would make it really bright, really high chroma, I'm gonna go for the low chroma yellow. And I'm gonna need a lot more yellow to make up for that blue. I'm also going to, at this moment, pull some white because I know that I'm gonna need it. So let's mix these together. So this looks like it's close in value, but it's too yellow. I added too much. So I'm going to now add a little bit of blue to kind of taper in some blue since it's kind of powerful. Okay, that's better. Maybe a little more. That's getting pretty good. Maybe a little more. Now, that to me looks like it's verging on what would happen kind of in here. And when I hold my palette knife up to it, you can kind of see it disappears in that area. Not so much here. So it got a little bit too dark, so I'm going to add a little bit more white. Maybe a little bit more. I left some of that old color. That can be fun too to see, because oftentimes when you're mixing a color like this, sometimes you'll find like this color could be in some places, but you're going for a different color, so I keep that one. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty darn good. Put some up there. It's kind of shiny, so it gives a little bit of a reflection. If I hold it up, you can kind of see it disappears. Might be slightly dark. Might be just a hair dark. So then I would give myself the option of going just a little bit lighter. And testing that out. And that looks pretty darn good. Awesome. Okay. So that was very helpful. Let's move on to the last one here. So this one is a darker green. So in terms of hue though, it's a green. It's a green that leans towards blue more. There's more of an obvious blue compared to this one. Then we also have value. It's a darker value. I'd say it's middle to dark, so it's going to be closer to black than it is to white, but not so dark. And then in terms of chroma, it's not an extremely high chroma because it's not like the brightest green you've ever seen, like an exit sign green or a green light green. But it's pretty saturated. In its darkness, it has still a very visible green hue. So that's gonna be like a medium to high chroma. Like not high, but medium, leaning towards high, not leaning towards low. We don't need to be super specific about like numbers. If you wanted to though, you can look up how to do the Munsell color system. That's something that will teach you how to assign numbers and letters to your color mixing and matching. So now with that in mind, I'm definitely going to start with the higher chroma blue because I see more blue in here. Whereas before, I don't know, I could have almost gone either way. You know, I could have started with this blue and maybe done this and then maybe added in some of that. So I'm going to start with some of this blue. And now in terms of a yellow, if I was to use this one, this would turn pretty bright green and I would have to lower the chroma. Let's do that. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. That might have been too much. Yeah, that was a little bit too much yellow. But you can see this is a higher chroma green. There's more green. It's less grayed out. But I went too light in value. Now, if I'm here and I want to get here, I need to get darker and bluer while keeping the chroma kind of the same. So if I pulled from here, it would do both of those. It would make it more blue and more dark. If I pulled from here, it would make it darker, maybe only a little bit more blue. So I'm gonna pull from this one first. A little bit at a time. Now, I don't want it to look too high chroma, so I'm gonna pull in just a little bit of ivory black to continue to help me darken, but just dampen that chroma just a little bit. Let's do a little more. That's not so bad. I think a little bit more actually. And there's quite a few colors over here as well. I was kind of going for the more middle one, not the sort of dark lines. Oh, looks like I got more of the darker version. Let's see if you can see that. Got more of that darker color. So I'm going to lighten it a little bit. Now, there's a couple options in terms of lightening. I could lighten with yellow. Either one of these yellows is lighter than this. So what that would do is it would keep it in the green family and keep it higher chroma while also lightening it. Or I could add white. Now white is a low chroma pigment, so if I add white, yes, it would lighten it, but it would also lower the chroma. So I need to be careful, do I want to do that? And I think I could do just a little bit. And if I lowered the chroma too much by doing that, yep, I think so. I could add just a kick of high chroma yellow back in there to bring it back to life. It's hard to see with the light here. Yeah, can you guys kind of see how those two shiny marks, how they end up blending in, hopefully. There. Pretty good. That's a pretty good start for a green. All these are. So when you're painting, you want to think about all of those things when you're mixing and matching, and it will really, really help you. Good luck with the exercise this month. I think, you know, if you can do this and really practice and make sure you use something that you can put the color on top of to really test, that would be great. You can see this kind of absorbed it in the end because it's kind of an absorbent paper, so it did make it look a little bit darker in the end. So that would change, but don't worry about that. Anyway, good luck.